Hello and welcome to this week's myNewsWrap, news from the world of SAP, Microsoft, and the world in between. Let's start with SAP. First things first, I would like to highlight two blog posts by Sate Isa that cover the topic of using SAP BTP Kyma runtime as an extension platform for customer data cloud. So the first blog post that's from the 10th of November is around generic customer data cloud extension, making use of Kyma. So basically how to set things up and using Kyma functions as a glue between the different systems. It's a super extensive, super high quality blog post, really highlighting how things work together, what is covered, tons of links on additional information. It's a really super high quality blog post, as is the second one by Sate. So, and this one is about enriching contact data of the customer data platform with data from with master data from the S/4HANA cloud system. Again, using as glue, as bringing things together, Kyma serverless functions. As the first one, super cool, extensive blog post. So if you want to learn more about how to use Kyma as an extension platform and are looking for high quality content, I would highly recommend to follow Sate at the SAP community, because these blog posts are really, from my perspective, outstanding with respect to how they are written. Then we are in the week after SAP TechEd, so there is, of course, a little bit of aftermath of the SAP TechEd. First thing first, there have been some sessions around Kyma, for sure, which was the Dev 105 and the Dev 261. And there have been questions within those sessions, and some could be answered within the sessions. However, the chat vanished after the session, which is kind of not so cool experience. And there have been some questions that couldn't be answered ad hoc within the session. Now, Marco Deon and his colleagues have put in some work, and they have gathered all the questions of the two sessions and provided the answers either given within the session or the ones where they said, hey, we had to have a follow-up. And they are now all available within the blog post that I've referenced within the show notes. So that's really cool. Great way. So if you have attended one of the sessions, if you remember, there was something, here is the complete Q&A. Now, if you want to download the PDFs of the sessions, so the slides that have been presented there, Tobias Hoffmann got you covered with a little tool that he provides for the community, which is the TechEd 2021 PDF downloader. He has it on GitLab, and there is some description how to use it. It's not really complicated. So if you want to download all the PDFs in one batch, use that tool. Highly appreciated that the community provides something like that. Then, of course, there have been quite some discussion around SAP TechEd, as I did in the last time, being a bit grumpy about the keynotes. There are two podcasts now out. One really focusing on the SAP TechEd keynotes by John Reed of the Genomica and Matthias Steiner, who is working for NetBeans Software, who exchange about the TechEd keynotes, so the executive keynote as well as the developer keynote. So it's kind of a very, very first impression. So according to the podcast, they are really recording that one more or less immediately after the developer keynote. So very first, very fresh impressions, very interesting to listen to. And there is also a second podcast that deals with the SAP TechEd 2021, which is published at the CoffeeCon Radio by the well-known host Martin Fischer, and also one of the founders of the CoffeeCon Radio, Simon Camp, joins the party, as well as Christian Braukmüller and Chris Payne, well-known members of the community, who exchange about the SAP TechEd in a very extensive podcast, so it's more than 1 hour. But great to listen to. So really a lot of insights, a lot of different points of views, of course, around low code, no code, around the free tiering, and so on and so forth. So really, really well spent time listening to that podcast as well as to the other one. So really cool. Yeah, that's it from the SAP side of the house. Let's switch to the Microsoft side of the house. And of course, first things first, serverless and functions. There is one thing that is in public preview now for Azure Functions, and that's the support for Node.js 16. As you might know, Azure Functions usually support the two last long-term support releases of Node, which is currently 16 and 14. So we are currently in the cycle of switching from 12.14 to 14.16 release support within Azure Functions. According to the announcement, this will be available around Christmas as GA, I would say. What you have to take into account is that the detailed version of Node.js differs between the Linux function app and the Windows function app. So for Linux, it's 16.13, and for Windows is 16.9.1. I would guess that that will be aligned at some point in time when things go GA. Now, if you want to have a complete overview of what happened within the Azure Functions ecosystem during the last more or less quarter, there is a blog post out on the tech community of Microsoft about a fall update on Azure Functions. So for the fall 2021, what happened? Most of the stuff, if you are a regular listener, watcher of this podcast, is nothing new to you. Especially things around runtime 4.0, .NET Azure Functions, .NET support for Azure Functions is with respect to .NET 6.0. So a lot of well-known stuff, some things that I might not have mentioned. So if you want to have a quick overview what happened within the last quarter within Azure Functions, that's the go-to resource, of course, linked within my show notes. Then there was one session, one meetup this week, so-called Dev Show, which covered a serverless topic with Mark Dwitja, host and founder of the Azure Functions University, talking about how to prevent building a serverless monolith. There was a really interesting session around how you can get stuck in a monolithic setup, even if you use all the cloud native tooling. So just because you're using the right tools doesn't mean you end up in some point of, let's say, corner where you struggle with the same problems that you have within legacy. And what was cool is that within the talk, Mark also pointed out some strategies how to escape that monolithic let's say, monolithic problem that you might face at some point in time when you build your application. So that's really cool. Really well invested 40 minutes of that talk. Then the well-known durable functions monitor by Konstantin Lepeshenkov is now, well, graded up. It's available in the official Microsoft GitHub repository. So you can fetch the durable functions monitor now from there. That's really cool. With that, let's switch to the container and Kubernetes area. And let's first, as a segue, switch, of course, to the Azure Container Apps. There is a new sample that I would like to highlight, provided by Jeff Holland, which is about using gRPC to communicate between two containers that are living within the Azure Container Apps. It's available within a lot of languages. So there is .NET 6, there is C#, there is Go, there is JavaScript, there is Java, and there is Python. So if you want to take a look at a very basic setup on how this gRPC communication from client to server works, this sample, I think, will get you covered with your first steps. Then, one more thing from the container area, from the Kubernetes area. Kida, the event-driven autoscaler, has a new version, 2.5.0. And this one is really packed with a lot of new functionality, with a lot of new scalars, tons of improvement, to be honest. And yeah, a lot of other quite nice new improvements that came out there. So if you're using Kida, take a look at this new release. There has been quite some stuff that has been done there. And again, what I really liked, I mentioned that last time already, the usage of this contributor functionality within the GitHub repo. So all the new contributors who made their first contribution or made a reasonable contribution to Kida are now highlighted within the release notes. So that's really cool. With that, I'm already at the end of the Kubernetes part of Microsoft. Having said that, don't forget, next Monday, there is the Azure Meetup Rosenheim session on the Azure Container apps. I'm really looking forward to that one. Now let's switch to then DevOps. First, a little bit info about Bicep. I mentioned the option to have a private registry for Bicep modules and how to structure your Bicep modules and modularize your library. During, I think, it was in the last and the one before where we had those blog posts. And now there is another blog post on how to deploy from one Bicep registry to another tenant within your Azure subscription. How to do that, how to make the setup, how to bring things together with quite some code samples. Quite nice blog post. I've referenced that one in the show notes. Then something, well, similar. How to provide multiple Azure subscriptions from one GitHub action. So you have one GitHub action, you have multiple subscriptions. How do you steer and guide where to deploy what? Making use of all the nice features that GitHub now brings with it, with the workflow-like stuff to make decisions, with the secrets that you can store there, and also with some naming conventions that you have to take into account in order to make things work. So that's another nice blog post, quite helpful for real-life deployment from my perspective. Then some news from the new features around GitHub. The secure deployment that was in public preview with OpenID Connect and GitHub Actions is now GA. So you can now use OIDC from your GitHub Actions workflow, which makes things more secure and will, I think, help you in setting things up. No matter where you want to deploy, is it AWS, Azure, or whatsoever. Yeah, that's cool. That's available. And then there is another functionality that is available now that was, I think, available around about half a year ago for the setup action for Node, namely the dependency caching. And that's now also available for Python. So you can now do dependency caching within the setup Python action within your GitHub action workflow. Now, what perfectly fits to that one is that you are not only able to do caching there, but the cache size per repository has been increased to 10 gigabyte, which is basically doubling the size that is available now. So you can now really cache a lot of dependencies within your workflow, which will probably improve the performance of your workflow. Yeah, then we have another nice feature that's not super essential, so you would be able to live without that, but I think it's really nice. You can now specify the theme an image is shown to. What does it mean? As you can see, if you're watching the video, you have dark mode available within GitHub. Now, all of you who have been writing readmes might become aware that sometimes you get stuck with the pictures. They do not perfectly fit in the dark mode. but they fit perfectly in the light mode and vice versa. Now you can kind of tell which picture is shown depending on the mode that the user is using. And I've also referenced a tweet by Thomas Domke, who is now CEO of GitHub, that perfectly highlights how this works. And it's really it's an improvement. It makes things a bit nicer in the world of GitHub. So that's really cool. Then one news from the broader Microsoft ecosystem, quite interesting for the area of cloud native development. It's a new article in the Azure Architecture Best Practices documentation. So it's part of the official Microsoft documentation area. And that's about a transactional outbox pattern with Azure Cosmos DB. So that one is from Christian Dening, also a cloud solution architect at Microsoft, especially for partners that I have referenced quite some times in this show. And this article is from him describing on how to deal or how to implement reliable messaging in distributed systems, which is hard, making use of Cosmos DB, namely the transactional batch and the change feed functionality there, and the Azure Service Bus. It's a really extensive description of the pattern of how to use it. And there is also a code sample really down below at the end of the article, giving you some quick start on how to set things up. So that's really cool thing. If you are working in that area, I think super helpful. Then let's switch to the world in between SAP and Microsoft. Of course, as every week, the SAP on Azure video podcast has a new edition. This time, again, very infrastructure focused on how to size SAP workloads. I think super important topic. If you are aiming towards using SAP on Azure, I think that's one of the key points that you have to take a look at in order not to be surprised by the costs that might arise. So this session gives you some insights, some tips and tricks, some best practices about this sizing topic. Then, of course, as I mentioned last week, Bartosz Jakowski's blog post series around extracting SAP data via OData and making use of it within Azure Synapse is now published on the tech community of Microsoft. And this week, the second part came out. So staying with this cadence, I think we have all the parts available until Christmas, which would be a really nice Christmas present, I would say. So again, thanks Bartosz for bringing that alive within the tech community, as the SAP community didn't treat you very well on that topic. Yeah, with that, let's switch to learning and events. First thing, one learning that I would like to highlight. It's published at the Heise Academy, which means it's only available within in German language. And that's about domain-driven design. Presented by Eberhard Wolf, who is fellow at the InnoQ. It's a 5-hour course, or around 5 hour, 75 videos that are available within this course. Very nicely short videos that you can easily digest step by step around domain-driven design, giving you, from my perspective, I would say a nice introduction, looking at the agenda and also dealing with topics that might not cross your path at the beginning, but are really important, like domain-driven design and legacy. So yeah, I mean, it's 99 euros, so it costs something. It's not for free, but I would assume it's worth it, knowing the contributions of Eberhard Wolf that you certainly also know if you are around the area of software engineering and software architecture, because he's really doing quite some high quality stuff there. And then one event that I would like to highlight, especially for those of you who might be active in the open source area. The event is hosted by GitHub about the future of open source and is it sustainable, talking about several talking with several contributors in the open source ecosystem, like Django, EncodeOS, and so on. I have referenced within my show notes the LinkedIn article that guides you then to the registration page for that event. With that, last section for today's session, developer productivity and fun. There I have quite some things for you. First thing is, if you are using Mac, you might have come across the point that the port 5000 is reserved by Apple on macOS Monterey. And there are some things that make use of that port besides Apple, like the app router in the SAP BTP ecosystem. And there is an article attached that tells you how to overcome that. There is also, I referenced the tweet on the topic. There is also one reply by Marius Obert from the developer advocates of SAP telling you how to overcome the topic with the app router. That is also a topic, I think, in the .NET ecosystem, because the 5000 port, I think, is also used, not 100% sure, in Blazor or somewhere like that. So it's really a point to take into account all across the board, that this port is kind of overbooked, but solvable. Then one thing for those of you who are or who want to do sessions, who want to speak at community meetups or at any meetup or at bigger conferences, there is a series called Speaker Ready that is hosted by Microsoft, but there are not only Microsoft speakers in there, which now contains 39 videos, all 30 minutes around that size, telling you very, very different aspects all around how to improve your presentation skills, how to improve your ways how to speak to an audience. Really cool stuff, really a lot of stuff that you can learn from very specific stuff, like how to do what you can do with PowerPoint, for example, when it comes to animations, but also, let's say, more soft skill stuff on how to do how to outline your story and so on. So really, really cool stuff. And it's all available within the link that I have put into the show notes. Now, another topic or another link that I would like to highlight is the JSON Patch Builder. I had quite some fun with a colleague of mine, Johannes Feicht, on patching with Kubernetes resources and using the JSON patch functionality there. And when I say quite some fun, we had quite some riddles to solve. And this JSON patch builder really helps you with that topic. And that's why I wanted to highlight that one. And then finishing up today's session with one Visual Studio Code extension that is brand new, called Key Shepherd by, if you look at the repository, by a well-known member, namely Konstantin Lepchenkov, who is also responsible for the Microsoft Durable Functions Monitor, who has created an extension that helps you with your credentials, so secrets, access keys, don't know what, within your configuration files that you added within your Visual Studio Code. And if you have done that once, I'm quite sure you have, as I, for example, forgotten to remove some strings from your local settings.json or somewhere like that. This extension gets you covered on that topic. I've referenced the extension per se, so the link to the Visual Studio Marketplace, as well as the blog post that Konstantin brought out, which gives you some more information about the idea behind the extension and what it does and what it does not do. Now, with this super cool extension, thanks again to Konstantin for providing such stuff, I'm at the end of today's session. I hope I had some interesting news for you. Hope some stuff to catch up during the next week. And with that, I wish you a nice Saturday, a great Sunday, and a successful next week. See you next Saturday. Until then, bye.